Hello, hello, and welcome. Welcome back to the CEO Sit Down. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Lauren Hatch. I'm the CEO and founder of Live Fearless Media, LF Teams, and Live Fearless Productions. And every Friday, we get together to answer your questions about building businesses, the latest and greatest in revenue streams, social media platforms, what you need to know, and all the insider tips and tricks that I can give on how I built a business from nothing over the last 7 years and how you can too. So this week is a little bit different with the CEO sit down. We are going to get to your questions. For those of you who submitted questions over on Instagram, thank you so much. We do have your questions. Like in weeks previously, you all have submitted way more questions than I could ever get to. So if you don't hear your question answered today, be aware that they will be on both YouTube Shorts and Instagram Stories over the coming days. So make sure to follow those platforms if you want to get notified when your question is answered. Second piece of this, we are talking about a very important piece of news in the social media world that I know a lot of my clients are very concerned about. So I figure that you all are as well. And that is the upcoming TikTok situation. Some of you asked questions about this, some of you didn't, but with tomorrow looming just ahead, we're going to talk the latest news that I know about as a social media insider and what you can be doing over the next 24 hours to prepare yourself. If you haven't started preparing already, it is not too late, although most people have, considering what happened in January. So we'll talk about the latest and greatest of what I know, why that either could mean really good things for us, but also could mean some really concerning things because there are some glaring omissions in what is being shared to the public right now, both to people just watching everyday media and everyday news, but also to insiders. Insiders are not getting much more of an inside loop than the average person right now, because in truth, I don't think even TikTok knows what's going to happen tomorrow, let alone what to tell any of us. So we'll talk about what we've heard and what you can be doing to plan that out. So let's start there, and then we will get into your questions. So for those of you who don't know, the extension on whether or not TikTok would sell or whether or not the TikTok platform would be able to stay in the United States is up tomorrow. So if we do not get an answer in the next 24 hours, actually less than that now because it's off Eastern Standard Time, TikTok will shut down again. Now, if you want my personal opinion, I think the reality is it may shut down, but we may be in for another short shutdown. I don't think this is going to be it's gone forever kind of thing. Now, there are some people that are concerned that tomorrow will be the last day ever with TikTok. Personally, I think with the combination of the amount of the American GDP that is invested in TikTok, I would say that right now, considering our economic situation, it would be stupid at best and idiotic at worst to allow this platform to go. It controls too many businesses. It controls too much of the sales pipeline. It controls way too many things for the US to be stupid enough to let it go. The United States is also the biggest player in this platform as far as finances and money going through TikTok. So I think TikTok doesn't want America to go either. Now, what does it take to make it so TikTok doesn't go? The law is in place. That we know for sure. There's nothing really that can be done unless Congress comes to the table and puts another law into play that will cancel this one out. Nothing's been put up yet. Not really. There were a couple of attempts at some sort of reworking of this bill through Congress, nothing made it very far, and nothing is far enough along in the process that it actually would affect tomorrow. So now we come to the place of the divestiture. So that's what this really is. People are talking about a sale of a business. TikTok, to be aware, actually has multiple owners. The ByteDance and China influence is not the only owner. So what has to happen is the amount of ownership held by ByteDance and China has to decrease according to the bill. So we have to put it in American hands. Now, is that possible? There are a few different ways that could happen, but here's the biggest problem. Will it actually meet the requirements of the bill? We don't know, because here's the biggest piece of this, the defining of what divestiture actually means. Divestiture could mean that China and ByteDance just have a smaller portion of that platform as ownership. It also could mean they have to go completely. And nobody's really defined it. This is one of the many reasons why people had problems with this bill in the social media industry. One, because in all honesty, this had nothing to do with public safety or national security, and it had everything to do with where is the money going. And issue two being there were never really any clear definers of what needed to happen, except for the sale of TikTok, which, by the way, the sale of TikTok could look in a lot of different ways, but there's one massive issue nobody's talking about and very few people are talking about, and that is China's put a law on the books in their country in, I believe, 2022. Don't quote me on that date, but I believe it was 2022, that companies that hold major investment in algorithms specifically, and that's the thing that makes TikTok TikTok, cannot sell them outside the country. So ownership cannot be given to companies outside the country. So when ByteDance and the Chinese investors that own TikTok either have a divestment either to minimize their ownership and or potentially sell out their investment, will China let go of the algorithm? Most likely not, in all honesty, according to the laws that are on the books in China. And so there's almost no way for us to get the platform as is. There is one opportunity on the table, one single solitary opportunity on the table that we have no idea right now whether China will take it or not. And that is potentially a sell-off where ByteDance's ownership decreases, and then an American company is created, an American entity that owns the American side of TikTok. And on top of that, the Chinese government and ByteDance would have to agree to lease back the algorithm to the United States. Because we can buy all we want in this business, but if we don't have the algorithm at the end of the day, TikTok doesn't stay the same. So that's the latest and greatest when it comes to TikTok. So that's the news side of this. So you might be saying, okay, so what does this mean? What happens now? And you know what? I don't even know if I'm live right now. Hold on. Because I'm getting a message from somebody that can't see me. Okay, hold on. Let's check something. Okay, no, I see me live. Okay, we're good. It looks like one of my team members can't see me. Okay, so let's talk about what this means for you as a business owner or a potential business owner or somebody using TikTok for business. What can you be doing to help yourself? Okay, for one thing, you need to identify other platforms to help you grow. If you have not been backing up your videos, if you have not been creating wider strategies, this is the time to do it. This idea that you only do one platform is not a strong strategy anymore. There used to be a day and age where we told businesses one platform. I tell every new business they need at least two. And so two focus platforms that can be utilized, and then distributing your information. Why? Because the reality is you don't own your social media platforms. Nobody does. You may own your copyrights and you may own parts of your content, but the minute you put something on social media, you no longer own it, and you do not own your lists. So a couple things you need to be doing. One, invest your time in strategies for at least two platforms outside of TikTok. The big ones that I'm seeing most of my clients go to that are having the easiest time transitioning their strategies from TikTok to other platforms, YouTube is a big one. And then if you're a B2B business, LinkedIn. I know a lot of like the influencer businesses are going over to Instagram. If you have a lot of millennials in your target audience, then I'd be getting over to Instagram. Facebook is typically the older generations, although it's becoming popular in the youngest generations now that are online, specifically not ones that are not online yet. But a lot of that is over in YouTube. YouTube can pretty much hit anybody, any demographic. I would say these days, everybody should be on YouTube for at least shorts. To really optimize YouTube, you do need to start developing a long format strategy of some sort. Now, I'm not talking like you need to do hour-long videos, but I am saying you need to develop some sort of pattern that's 10, 15, or 30 minutes long. One of the biggest things that I've seen a lot of my clients delving into is they're really getting super creative with it and actually developing out what is basically like a storylined TV show for their brand. They're loving that. Their clients are loving that, and it's having really big success. So if you are thinking about a YouTube strategy, start by taking your TikTok strategy over to Shorts, and then start developing out that long format, whatever that looks like, whether that's a video podcast, a live stream like you're on right now, or something of that nature that will allow you to continue that communication and develop out a broader base on YouTube so you can create a more appealing platform. B2B, LinkedIn is where it's at. As I said, LinkedIn is loving long format content. So the big thing with LinkedIn, live streams like this, fantastic way to grow your LinkedIn. Another thing, blog posts. Blog posts, as I said in a previous live, have not gone the way of the dodo bird as many people think. A lot of people think that video has replaced writing. That is not the case. There are still platforms where significant growth can be found in writing, Google and LinkedIn being two of them. And so what I would suggest to you is continue to write blog posts for your website and then cross-post them into your LinkedIn. You can create a newsletter format if you have a monthly or weekly newsletter that you send out to an email list. You can create a variation or just copy paste directly into your LinkedIn to give an alternate version of that newsletter. It's a really easy, fast way to start creating content that can create some sort of buzz, and then you can create out that larger strategy over the next coming weeks and months in order to replace that or make it more effective for you. As I said, if you have a millennial audience, there's very few places that can beat attracting a millennial audience other than Instagram. Instagram will beat anything and everything these days. That is a good place to go. and a good place to grow your social media presence. If you're looking for a millennial audience, Gen Z may transition over there from TikTok, but I think potentially not. I think you'll find a lot of the Gen Zs mostly on YouTube. That being said, for those of you out there who are going, well, why are we talking about millennials and why are we talking about Gen Zs? They're not the decision makers in most businesses. I hate to tell you this, and I'm going to preach this till the cows come home. Millennials and Gen Z are not as young as you think anymore. I am in meetings all of the time where I talk about an organization's need to attract or target Gen Z and millennials. And they go, well, they're so young. Why would we do that? They're not the decision makers yet. Why would we do that? Millennials are all in their 30s and 40s at this point. All in their 30s and 40s. And Gen Z, a significant portion of them are in their mid to late 20s. They are no longer children. Despite what most people think, they are no longer children. And a significant portion of millennials and Gen Zs went a very non-traditional road when it comes to business, when it comes to leadership, when it comes to a lot of things. So they are stepping into roles that previously were not held by their age group significantly faster. You're seeing more millennial CEOs. You're seeing more Gen Z CEOs. I know several Gen Z CEOs who are in 25, 26, 27 years old. I know that seems crazy, and I know it makes our generation seem like we just want the world without doing the work. In all honesty, most of us have proved our chops. In all honesty, most of us got to learn the beginner steps in school, because this is not going to surprise anybody, but the majority of the world now runs on technology. And most of us learn technology in school or even just by using it ourselves. So we have a step up on the older generations that allowed us to kind of skip over things because we knew more. That's the plain and simple. The reality is there's a reason I was a 28-year-old entrepreneur and CEO. What? And by the way, a 28-year-old entrepreneur and CEO, where my average client age when I was 28, this is not the case anymore, but when I was 28 years old, was 64 years old. My clients were all in their 50s, 60s, 70s, and I actually had a client who was in her 80s. When I was 28. The reason being is I could walk into a room with authority because I had a lot of technical background just from the fact of the generation I was born in, not what I was taught in school, not anything really super special, just purely based on the idea that I was life educated and able to jump into that. So that's a big part of this. So I would heavily recommend that if you haven't thought about millennials or Gen Zs being your target audience, I would very much think about it, especially if you're in a B2B business. These days, there are more millennials as decision makers than ever before. And you're starting to see millennials be the top bosses significantly more. By the way, if you're in a place where you're trying to hire, I know this is not really a big season of hiring. It's been more of a big season of firing. But I would very, very much recommend taking a look at the Gen Zs and the millennials. I know a lot of news reports make them seem like they don't care or they're in another world or they are entitled. But they're usually pretty knowledgeable. Just something to think about. I know there are going to be those who disagree with me in my comments because just like my average age of my client being up there, the average age of my audience member is also up there. They are not in their 20s. So let's jump into your questions. Usually I have them on my phone, as you know, but I have them on my computer today over here. So let's dive into as many as I can answer in the next like 15 or so minutes. I'll probably go about 5 minutes over. Usually this is about half an hour. If I go over, I go over. Let's see. Okay, so let's start in content creation because we've been talking about content platforms. How do you stay creative with content when you feel uninspired? Okay, so here's the thing. Content strategies can get monotonous. And if you're constantly repeating things that work, in all honesty, they work, there comes a point in the creative process for any creative where it's like, oh my gosh, kill me. I don't want to do this another time. Even if they're working, there will always come a time where you're sitting there going, I just don't want to do this. You have to find ways to make small pivots. When we talk about pivots, a lot of times we're talking about like 180 degrees or 90 degrees, like major degree changes. But the reality is a 1% change can make all the difference when it comes to not only the creative process and keeping you engaged, but also you can get even better results if you make a 1% change, right? A 1% change over time can take you to an entirely different part of the world, right? So I had a mentor who always taught me, think about it as the wheels on a truck. If you are driving from your home to a field every day, the same direction, the same way, and the wheel is never turned, you actually end up with grooves in the road saying where you've gone and where you don't. If you turn that wheel 1 degree, at first, it's not going to take you very far off the path. In fact, you'll probably stay in the grooves. But eventually that 1 degree moves and moves and moves. And if you take that 1 degree over miles, you're actually hundreds of miles from where you started. So a 1 degree change, a little tiny thing that'll spark your creativity or do it a little bit differently. So whether that is changing color, changing a way you engage and interact, a call to action, a beats in the production. So if you don't know what beats in the production is, there are certain things we would try to hit at certain timings when we do production, just to kind of keep a storyline rolling. Changing the beats, the pattern of the beats, how fast you transition from your hook to your main statement. Don't do this. Don't take out a hook. Always have some sort of hook. It doesn't have to necessarily be like a true, like, did you know, blah, 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 blah. You should have things like visual hooks, sitting down in a chair, inviting somebody in a doorway, doing something. You should have some sort of hook, because the reality is social media, short format, necessary to have hooks. Long format, also necessary to have hooks, but you need multiple over a storyline. That's a whole nother thing. We won't go there. But 1 degree of change, one small feature at a time. And in fact, what you can do is do the 1 degree change, test it over time, see if you get better results. And then you change something else, and 1 degree of change, test it over time, see if you get better results. If you don't get better results, you go back to the old way, right? But give yourself the chance to test on small increments, especially if you've got something that is working. If you don't have something that's working, then make a 180 shift. You shouldn't hold on to something just because you want to if it's not working. If it's like you're uninspired and you're just doing it again and again and it's not working, make that rapid shift of 180 degrees and make it fast, because it ain't worth it. Should I post my prices online or keep them off my page? Absolutely post your prices. Absolutely post your prices. there are a lot of people who disagree with me on this because this is probably one of the most controversial things we talk about in marketing. Here's the thing I know. If you don't post your prices, you need some prices at least. You don't have to post every single price you have and every single offer and every single variation on the offer, especially if you do custom offers or custom variations on your offers. It should be custom variations on your offers, not custom offers. If you want to know why, check out my live from last week. I explain this in detail, or 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago. Sorry, not last week. 2 weeks ago. I explained this in detail as to why you don't want all custom offers, custom variations on an offer is a better way to do it. So what I would suggest is posting some of your opportunities. And by the way, it should be on a ladder, right? You shouldn't just post your low opportunities. You need some of your low, some of your mid, and some of your high ticket. Now, most of your high ticket is probably more custom if you have true high ticket offer. So high ticket offers, $10,000 a month or more traditionally, but that's may not be your high ticket depending on what your offer ladder looks like. That high ticket may be lower, it may be higher. But I would heavily suggest having at least one offer per level on your site. And you may have more than one at that low ticket level, usually several. So like if you have ebooks or templates or something of that nature on the low ticket end where it's like a $40 or $100 or even depending on your ladder, $1,000 may be low ticket for you. It may not. $1,000 is about where my low ticket caps out. And then I go to mid-level, that's up to about $5. And then my ladder starts at $5 on high ticket, just because of the way we typically work. But that isn't always the case because, for instance, Live Fearless Productions is a production studio. And so when you get into production world, the pricing within the industry is significantly higher. So don't take these as rote. I just gave you the ladder for Live Fearless Media, which is the full service social media agency that has 3 levels that we serve at. DIY, so you buy something for us, you do it yourself. We help you services, and then the we do it for you services. So that's also one way you can break it down. But I would suggest putting some sort of pricing, because this is the problem if you put no pricing whatsoever, especially if you target newer or younger businesses. So if you are targeting startups, if you are targeting small business, if you are targeting mom and pop shops, even if you're targeting larger businesses that may be newer, like tech startups or something of that nature, they want to know some sort of pricing going in. Now, the pricing is going to be heavily influenced by the industry you serve, not just the industry you're in, but the industry you serve, because tech startups are used to paying a lot more. Financial services companies are used to paying a lot more. They're expecting bigger price tags versus, say, mom and pop coffee shop, not going to expect the same price tag as a tech company, right? Different worlds. So what you do and who you serve should be taken into consideration, but something should be there because everybody should know whether or not they can afford you in some capacity, especially new businesses. If they don't think they can afford you, they will not contact you. And if they don't contact you, you have no way to begin the conversation. At the end of the day, you actually may be the service provider for them. But if they don't know that, if they have no way to have that conversation, you can't prove that to them. So you've got to give them some sort of inkling of what this might look like, and put something on your site or with your pricing saying prices may vary based on blah, blah, blah. You see this all the time. You see the asterisk next to the price, pricing not final, pricing may vary, blah, blah, blah. The reason for that is just to give somebody an idea and then go on. Now, with things like templates, if they're not custom templates, if they're just buying templates or an ebook, pricing doesn't vary, right? Pricing is set unless it goes on sale. But it is something to help make sure that your potential client can see themselves working with you and they're not worried that they won't be able to afford you. This is especially true if you work with women. Men, not as much. Men don't think about this nearly as much. But if you work with female entrepreneurs, female business owners, women in general, if they don't know some sort of idea of whether or not they're actually going to be capable of affording you, they won't contact you. So some sort of pricing gives them an idea, a scale from which to work off of. Okay, is it okay to completely rebrand if I've changed directions? Yes, in fact, I would suggest it. Is it okay to rebrand? If you are completely changing directions, I would heavily suggest a rebrand, because most likely whatever brand you develop, because brand is more than just the color, right? It's more than just a logo. You hear people who specialize in branding say this all the time. Brand is more than this. There's a reason why branders, like, the number one thing we create is actually a brand book. And that's not a 1-2 page thing. That's usually something like 20 to 50 pages, depending on the brand. Some brand books can go even longer than that, with all these different variations on things you need to know about a brand. How do we communicate? What do we say? Who are we communicating with? Why do we communicate this way? What sort of tone do we use? What platforms specifically do we utilize? All of this is taken into consideration with brand and brand strategy. So when you're rebranding, it's not just creating a new logo or choosing a new font or choosing new colors for your website. It is redefining all of these things. And if you choose to pivot your services dramatically, meaning pivot my services in industry, pivot my service in the audience which I talk to, pivot my services in a way that is dramatically different from where I started, you have to go through a rebrand, because of the fact that, for instance, audience. If you start talking to a completely different audience, then you're going to need to look different and sound different than your initial audience, because they expect different things. They are informed by different things. For instance, let me give you a sample. I have a client. This is a real world sample. I'll leave out their name though. I have a client who went from serving nonprofits to serving for-profit businesses. They are in the financial services world, and nonprofits and for-profit businesses handle their finances very differently, right? When they made that switch from traditional small nonprofit, because that's who they were serving, small nonprofits. Now, small nonprofits, typically, you're looking at $250,000 or less in donations. That's how much these people per year. This is how much in donations these people collected per year, $250,000. That's who they served. So they then pivoted to for-profit businesses. When they did that, now these are dramatically different audiences with dramatically different budgets, with dramatically different expectations. When they did that, they had to change the way they talked. They had to change who they communicated to. They had to change a lot of things. And with that, the brand shifted. So even if, by the way, even if you're not going through a rebrand from a visual perspective, you're going to keep the visual colors. You're going to keep the logo the same. You're going to keep a lot of the things that you did visually. You're going to have a pivot in the brand voice itself. So you're going to need to rebrand the way you speak. So you're going to need to go through some sort of rebranding process. I would suggest, especially if you're doing a large pivot, do the whole thing, both visual and voice. but that's up to you as to how much you want to take on. Oh, this is a really good one. Have you ever needed or been called to pause or pivot even when things are working? Yes. Okay. So most people think when it's working, just keep going. Truck it along, truck it along, truck it along. There are times where you need to pause and pivot. And I think this is kind of a God thing. Usually there's a barricade within your spirit, something you feel as a leader within a company that says, I need to take a second. I need to take a step back. And by the way, the pause and the pivot doesn't mean you stop selling. Let me make this clear. The pause and the pivot means you as a leader take a step back and look at it from a different angle, right? This is not, I'm going to shut my company down tomorrow because I was asked to pause. Your company will still operate. Your services will still run. But you need to go take the 1,000-foot view of this and look at it from a different angle. And in order to do a 1,000-foot view, you can't be in the nitty-gritty of the everyday. This is the idea of working on the business versus in the business. Good leaders know when they need to work on the business. And so you take yourself out of the equation in some capacity. Now, some of you are solopreneurs, you're single owner businesses. You cannot take yourself out of the entire process. Been there. Know this very, very well. But finding space in your day to say, I'm going to pause. I'm going to think about this. I'm going to process information is good. Sometimes taking a pivot, whether that's, again, we're going back to this 1-degree pivot, right? Sometimes taking something on a 1-degree pivot, even though it was working, may give you a better result. Sometimes you're asked to pause something that's working completely to put something else into play as an owner. You may have to do that at times. It's worth it to do it. That's what I'm going to leave it at. That being said, guys, it's the end of my day. I got to